Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Lambo channel. The price of XRP jumped today along with the broader crypto market, and isn't it interesting that in recent days, tons of analysts that I follow, as I've been noting, have been saying, guys, this is the moment where we're going to see a big move finally. We've been stagnant for however long it's been, a couple months or so, with very minimal volatility for what we're used to in crypto. And increasingly, especially yesterday, tons of analysts finally yesterday, so many of them were piling on. They're like, guys, like this has got to be the moment. Like this is roughly it. And I shared so many examples of analysts highlighting that point. And they're saying again about crypto, Bitcoin in particular. But what I find with the analysts that I follow is that when there are a ton of them saying the same thing or similar thing, they're almost always right. And here we are. Massive move today. You had XRP 24-hour low of $2.07, ran as high as $2.24. Bitcoin, let's see what it was at. $87,865, ran as high as $93,928. Both are a little bit lower at the time I'm recording this. By the way, it's 8:45 p.m. Central Time, which is my time zone, Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. XRP currently $2.20 in Bitcoin at just a hair shy of $93,000. So a big move today. Big move today. So we'll talk about why, what we can expect moving forward. And let's just say this. There's increased confidence from all sorts of people who are holding XRP that the analysts who have been insisting we're going to be seeing double-digit price action for XRP, that they're actually correct. And I will not be surprised if indeed that, broadly speaking, any price point around there, double-digit up, I will not be surprised if that is indeed what passes before this cycle's over. But before going further, I do want to be clear, I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. All right, so here's a post from Raoul Pal, and he, of course, is the founder and CEO of Global Macro Investor GMI and Real Vision. Shared this with his 1.1 million followers out there. What we have on the screen here is, in black, the global M2, so we're talking about liquidity. It's some of the most liquid money on the planet, and then the pink line is the price of Bitcoin. And of course, global liquidity does have a 12-month lead time, so you have to adjust for that, and that's why it's overlapped the way that it is, and that's why this black line goes up higher than the Bitcoin price. And so this afternoon, as prices were obviously already launching upward like we haven't seen in months, frankly, Raoul Pal wrote, maybe, just maybe, it was this easy all along. If this works, it will definitely prove that liquidity is the dominant factor still in markets. Not tariffs, not politics, not rates, not, in the parentheses rates, not insert your narrative. And so that could be true. Now, I don't believe that there's any single one metric that is the end-all, be-all, not even global liquidity. Now, this is, I would agree, absolutely a big one, and you can see this correlation going back the last couple years. But as I've noted, even though there is high correlation here, it's not perfect. Like there can be spans of time, then I've pointed this out, where you can see that the correlation seems to evaporate sometime, and this doesn't usually happen, but sometimes like months on end. For instance, so here's a global liquidity going out, over a decade, and that's what this line in the middle here is, and then the upper price here is Bitcoin. This is from Chart Analyst Tech Dev. And you can see here, for instance, in 2014, if you look at the price of Bitcoin, it's going down, 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 while liquidity is increasing, but there are outlier instances. So I think in that instance, I'm pretty sure it was like the biggest gap in history where there wasn't really noticeable correlation. 8 months, I think it went, about 8 months anyway. And the price of Bitcoin went down. But what happened then? Was there a good reason? Yes, as it turns out there was, because in the beginning of 2014, that's when Mt. Gox was hacked and the price of Bitcoin just cratered. Absolutely cratered. So there's a catalyst. Also, it was a nascent asset and, very few participants, way lower liquidity. And so you just saw that price whipsaw like crazy. And so what you see since then is when there are moments of less liquidity, they're much shorter than that. Even if you can that's just why I always say, if you zoom out on a chart, you can see very easily that liquidity absolutely does move in tandem with Bitcoin. It's liquidity that leads, then Bitcoin follows. So it's not that there's a 100% guarantee that just because liquidity is going up, that XRP and everything else is going to go, but it's a good indicator. if I had to bet, and with the confluence of everything else, probably hell yeah. This is why, if you're an XRP holder like me, you should be ridiculously excited about what's probably going to occur here. And I've also been talking about how, and again, nothing's the end all be all, but I've been talking about how this tariff stuff, it's a narrative, and for understandable reasons, it's spooked markets. It's going to go away. This problem will cease to exist. And it doesn't take much. And of course, this was always going to go away. Look at this headline from CNBC. Look at this. And mind you, the stock market and the crypto asset class, broadly speaking, moves in tandem. Look at this headline. Dow jumps 1,000 points Tuesday to snap 4-day string of losses. Stocks rallied Tuesday on hopes that U.S.-China trade tensions could ease soon, as investors recovered from the steep declines suffered in the previous session. The major averages spiked on the news that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told a group of investors Tuesday that there will be a de-escalation, and that's a quote, will be a de-escalation, in the trade war with China. And he said, quote, no one thinks the current status quo is sustainable, end quote. He said that during a meeting with investors hosted by JP Morgan Chase, according to a person in the room. The meeting was first reported by Bloomberg News. And so this is the narrative going on as far as why this is going up. And there's all sorts of stuff. There are also rumors about, or maybe it wasn't even a rumor, but there's a comment, I believe, from President Trump about how he wasn't going to get rid of Jerome Powell, was going to fire him, and markets may have responded to that this afternoon. But this would be a big one. Obviously, once the tariff stuff goes away and you see that global liquidity is on the rise, there's a couple major things to think, maybe the market's going to be pretty excited about that. Maybe these are great conditions for number go up, right? And so as I wrote here, Bessent is obviously trying to send a signal with that comment, and that signal would seem to be that we know this is hurting markets and we're in a hurry to wrap it up, said Jed Ellerbrook, a portfolio manager at Argent Capital Management. The market will interpret that as good news that will cause it to rally and adjust its expectations for where the final resting place for this trade war is in a couple months. And so that's why when you look at this liquidity here, and again, this is back to Chart Analyst Tech Dev here, sharing this with his 521,000 followers, there's a reason he wrote, this chart says the biggest Bitcoin move in 5 years has begun. Now, that's pretty exciting to think about, because I'll tell you this, there's been notable price action over the last half a decade, including even in November when Bitcoin went from somewhere, wasn't the price around $65,000, ran up to $108,000. So I'm just saying, if this is going to be even more notable, that would certainly be something. Liquidity is a major factor here. Major, major, major. And I will tell you this, even though it's, nothing's going to perfectly correlate down to the second, the day, the week, necessarily the month, so on and so forth. But I will tell you that when you look at the price of Bitcoin for over a decade and just plop that right on top of global liquidity, what you find is the vast majority of the time, there is strong correlation. So if you bet on that lining up at any point in the future, unless this actually changes, you'd be way more right than wrong. You won't be right 100% of the time, but the vast majority of the time you're going to be right. So do you want to take the losing end of that bet? Because I'm betting that the losing end of that bet is saying that we're not going to have a final blow-off top here. That doesn't make the most sense. That would be an irrational, irresponsible bet in my mind. Here's a post last night from chart analyst Polly. And so this is before the most recent XRP price action. He wrote, XRP about to blow faces soon. This coil is unreal. Now, in a video last night that I published, it was probably close to 24 hours ago, I noted some examples. There are tons of people saying, hey, Bitcoin's going to go, and I gave a few examples, and I gave you probably several examples of XRP chart analysts saying, guys, this thing's primed, it looks like it's going to go. This is another one. He shared this last night. I didn't share this one yesterday, but I just came across it. I was like, tons of people saw this. The fact that they all saw this is because they're not terrible chart analysts. They have pretty damn good hit rates. And so when tons of them notice the same thing again, and so then you can be wondering, well, what are they saying now? Is it still number go up season? Yes. Preface that a little bit though. Or a little asterisk next to that concept. It doesn't mean all of what we're about to say, like the craziest blow part, that doesn't mean it literally happens tomorrow though. Yes, there's going to be some strong parabolic pushes to the upside, and that's broadly speaking what I think pretty much all these chart analysts think is most probable. That doesn't mean that it happens instantaneously. Just because we had this fun burst after months of basically sideways price action, Just because we had that, it doesn't mean that that's all we're going to see now. But here's a post from chart analyst Greg Crypto. XRP, a fork in the road, $17. It says the upper edge of our ascending broadening wedge is currently between $5 and $6. If we can close above this level, it paves the way for a potential measured move reaching all the way up to $17. Okay, and he's been steadfast on that point. He posted that this morning, and the market had been moving to whatever degree, even as of this point in time. It was 10:21 a.m. Central Time. But you're going to reach a point where it's just truly face-melting escape velocity. And it's just, that's what happens when demand overwhelms supply. Because you're always going to have at any given point in time a bunch of people trying to sell. They hop on their exchange, they got their XRP ready to let it go at key levels if anybody's actually going to take that price. And you tend to have these clumps at various price levels where people want to sell. But once you break through that, you melt to the upside. That's the type of stuff we've seen with Bitcoin historically. That's the type of thing we've seen with XRP historically. I mean, we just witnessed it, folks, multiple times here. This cycle over the last half a year, roughly. But the most fun part, with the biggest gains yet ahead if history is indeed to rhyme with itself. Here's a post from chart analyst Dom. He says the 1,000 Bitcoin wall on Binance Spot was eaten and price shot 2,000 in seconds. This was insane to watch live. And I'll pause and note, this is at 5:02 p.m., so just close to several hours ago. And that is quick, like in a matter of seconds to jump up that high. See, that's what happens though. Once you get through these major points of resistance, if you have bought, the buyers, if they have bought from everyone that's willing to sell in that particular moment, then the next person that's willing to sell wants a way higher price, the price jumps. That's what we're talking. Anyway, so he says, I haven't seen this bullish aggression in months. Over $400 million net market bought in that 5-minute window. That is wild. Shorts got blown out heavy. Check open interest at bottom. All we need to watch now is if price loses that white line where that massive wall sat. That would be a bearish setup and textbook deviation. Well, all I can tell, and I don't pretend to know what the price will be by the time you guys are watching this. It could be about the same, could be way higher, way lower. I'm not a chart guy. I'm not in that game. I'll just note at the time that I'm recording this, key support levels for Bitcoin and XRP absolutely are holding. In fact, on the XRP front, here's what Dom had to say. It says, XRP, this is a bizarre time with how alts are acting in relation to Bitcoin. It's hard for me to gauge what happens in the next day or so, as this is not behavior we have seen in months. $2.20 is all that matters. Bulls defend, and this stays bull to move towards quarterly VWAP in the 240, so $2.40 plus is what he's talking about. So a move up quickly. He says, it looks ready to snap. That's a reference to XRP. It looks ready to snap, but we know Bitcoin can ruin the show. Yep, that's true. If Bitcoin does start tanking to the downside, don't be surprised if this would be a moment where XRP pulls back a bit. But even if so, not the end of the world. We're just talking about short-term price action. That won't change what happens on a higher time frame, obviously. Here's a post from Nebraskan Gooner, 381,000 followers here on X. This guy suffers from XRP derangement syndrome. He does not like it. And so that's why when he does chart XRP, which isn't that frequently, in parentheses, he's always sure to write per request. Because he wouldn't want his toxic Bitcoin maxis followers to think that he would want to talk about XRP. Well, if I must, fine. But it's per request. I don't want to do it, though. Anyway, so he says, sitting right at neckline resistance. A breakout would target the red resistance zone above. And I will note, for those of you not looking, that would be about $2.50. Upwards, $2.40 to even maybe a little over $2.50. That is similar to what I am seeing from a lot of chart analysts out there. Somewhere in that range. Here's a post from Don Alt. Now, this guy has a much more severe case of XRP derangement syndrome, but I can and do appreciate the fact that he has, and he's been acknowledging this since November, XRP has just been primed. It's just good. Even back before it, got above $1, he's like, guys, this thing is absolutely going to destroy. I'm paraphrasing here, but he's like, yeah, this is going to destroy everything else. Like, this will be a top performer. And he's still saying that. He's still insisting this. And he thinks that XRP is a shitcoin because he suffers from XRP derangement syndrome. But at least he's being intellectually honest enough to think that this coin, which has some of the greatest utility in the entire space, even if he won't admit it, he believes it is going way higher. And so here he wrote, just this morning, XRP still one of the most interesting altcoin charts out there, chilling at range low after having wiped out the lows before. If this market upswing holds, I'd expect this to be amongst the best performers still. That's right, folks. It's not done. Now, of course, like Dom was even saying, I just showed you, Bitcoin can read the party. So if Bitcoin does go back down, okay, whole market's probably going to do that. And we're in truly volatile times from a narrative perspective. I mean, you can just think about the tariff stuff. You know, a sneeze from the White House can cause markets to go berserk, which is why the volatility's been all over the damn place. I mean, it seems like the S&P 500 has been acting like it's a crypto, you know, like it's like with in terms of volatility, it's trying to, because it's greater volatility than would be the norm, and that's why I say that. But eventually, of course, this is just a no-brainer. All the tariff stuff goes away. We're at a point where global liquidity is increasing. XRP has been artificially suppressed for years, but now it's finally breaking to the upside. We're not done. There's so many reasons to be optimistic for what's about to happen this calendar year. Like, probably, whether it could be weeks, it could be months. We'll see. In fact, so I was listening to the Blockchain Backers' most recent video this morning, and there's so much great info in there. If you want to go in depth, you should absolutely check it out. Great video. But I will just note, like, a couple things that stood out to me. You know, he does believe that XRP has bottomed. This most recent drop, you know, when it got down to whatever, it was like $1.60, whatever it was. Same for Bitcoin. And I don't remember how low it got. It was probably down to what, 75, 76,000, something like that, if memory serves. Point is, when those happened, those were the bottoms. That was that. And so he wasn't promising, and he's not necessarily expecting even, he's not expecting this for this to be the moment where parabolic price action happens. It's more like he was talking about a various structure that could play out, that could result in, even if a little bit higher than it's been for much of the last couple of months, playing out sideways for a little while, whether it's a month or whatever. So we're not there yet, but he does firmly talk about this idea of these prices going way higher. And even for Bitcoin, he was talking, he wasn't promising this, but he was talking about, I think it was something like $125,000, $130,000 for Bitcoin. Well, man, if it peaks there, my God, the amount of money that will then flow into XRP will be monumental if it gets anywhere in that range. And that could happen. In fact, that's conservative compared to most of the analysts that I found. Not by like a crazy amount or anything. But he is more conservative, which is totally respectable. That's fine. That's not a critique at all. You know, he's more critique with his XRP expectations and Bitcoin. Totally fine. But, you know, most of the analysts that I follow when they're talking about Bitcoin would be more like, okay, 150. On the low end, I do see like 130, but it's usually more like somewhere around $150,000. Some people be like, okay, 180, something like that. But either way, even just getting that high to like $125,000, $130,000, my God. And the whole market will be going absolutely insane if Bitcoin starts ripping like that. And again, everything's lining up in a way that would make you think, hey, this actually could happen. And sooner than later. There's also this post from chart analyst Crypto Insight UK, XRP to $2.33 next. So based on buy walls and such, he's thinking that, yeah, you're going to be seeing some freaking jumps here. I was just another example. This is what I've been seeing across the board. I'm not sharing with you every example from every analyst that I saw today. I was just kind of handpicked some to get the idea across. But there's a ton of them, you know? Here's Javon Marks, chart analyst. He was talking about how there was going to be a breakout. One of the many ones. I think I highlighted him yesterday too, actually. I'm pretty sure. If not, then it would have been maybe a couple days ago. But he was calling for a breakout, and he said, XRP breakout successful, to be continued. And that's what he shared this afternoon. And he believes this goes much higher as well. So sit tight, folks. We're going to see what happens here. But I think that there's very good reason to be optimistic that indeed things are going to get much better before this cycle peaks. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say are right. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the moon, Lambo.